Well, it's time to review the markets from this week, and Derrick Hermesch is here with us with Paragon Ag Advisors, Silver Lake, Kansas. Yeah, Derrick, I know that there's still a lot of conjecture whether or not how this is all going to play out. One of the things that I've continually heard in trading these markets, and then the ags and commodities in particular, is that whether and when we get a final trade deal and when we start seeing all this trade happen, with the reduction of the hog herd, with the destruction of demand, with the big crop out of South America, there's still, and I want to also say with the big crops that we have had and the carryover that showed up in the World Supply and Demand Estimate on Friday, there's still maybe a little bit of a black hole we need to climb out of here in this grain market, and we'll go there first. Is that the same thing that you're hearing also?
There's plenty of talk about that, and it is a real thought, and there's no getting away from it. There's a ton of supply out there right now. Things to counter that though, as far as, when we're talking about, what is going on this week is really being hammered by, the trade deal specifically, a surprise of, an announcement of we increasing tariffs, But if a trade deal were to happen with the way the markets have been beaten down so far to this point, I do think, especially just the price reaction that we've had to the downside at this point, that you would get a huge turnaround with some sort of trade deal announcement. If it was a real, trade deal announcement and it was believed, you would get a monster turnaround, I think, at this point with how far we've beaten the markets down. That does not get us out of the black hole, as you speak of there, as far as supply goes, but it would give us, the motion to start, and then after that, because you could have a pretty big turnaround at this point without, actually putting the prices anywhere near, near historical averages as far as what we've had for the last 5 years. Specifically looking at soybeans there. Wheat and corn, a little bit different story, but soybeans is the major concern and is the one that has the bigger supply, story at this point. And so I think definitely hearing talk like that, there's definitely credence to that point, but I do think at this point, where if we do get a trade deal in place, I think you would see a pretty big turnaround, but as far as what that looks like, and it needs to be believed too. It needs to be something real that has some meat behind it.
Sure. I got 2 minutes left here, and in the time we have left, I want to talk about the cash cattle trade. Earlier this week we traded cattle on Wednesday, a big part of it anyway. We did a little bit of cleanup trade on Thursday. Some trade even happened on Tuesday. Are we starting to get into this rut because of the weaker cattle market that we're going to trade earlier in the week and just settle for some of these lower prices until we see demand come back, or until we see things really start to pick up, or maybe even the hog market lift this cattle market back up?
So that is really interesting, right? Because always before it's cattle trade on Friday afternoon after the markets close, and that has a lot more to do when the negotiation has been an upward trending cattle market. But yeah, we've been seeing for the last 2 weeks earlier cash trade, and a big part of that is at this point, if you are somebody that is hedged off of the June board, you have an unbelievable positive basis to work with, and the cash trade, even though it is weaker than where it had been, 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, it's not so much weaker that you still don't have incentives there, whether you're hedged or not. But especially if you're hedged off the June board, the basis is in your favor. It's going to be real interesting to see how that cash dynamic, what happens here in the next 2 weeks as we get to the end of May, because the basis is more, it's going to have to narrow up at some point to meet up with that June contract. Right now, with cash trading at 120 versus the June futures at, 111 to 112 this week, you're dealing with that positive basis. But when that starts to narrow up, and then you probably see that cash trade start to push back and not trade until later in the week and have that Friday afternoon back. But the earlier cash trade in the week that's something different than what we usually see.
That's a good point. All right, if somebody want to find out more about Paragon Ag Advisors in Silver Lake, Kansas, how do they do it, Derrick?
Well, you bet. Best way is to give us a call. You can reach us at 888-452-8751. Otherwise, you can visit our website. That is myagadvisor.com.
Okay, Derrick, thank you very much. Derrick Hermesch, Paragon Ag Advisors, for this portion of the program. Stick around. We've got more coming up right after this break on KSN's Agribusiness Weekly.